I recently had a colleague dealing with a malnourished dog, and she was really worried about refeeding syndrome. And refeeding syndrome is a real thing. There's a lot of information out there about what it is. You can look that up elsewhere. I want to talk about how it happens, why it happens, take a different look at it, and see what all modern Western medicine gets wrong about refeeding syndrome. So, again, this is the severely malnourished animals that come from neglect situations and hoarding situations that rescue groups and rescuers and humane societies see. I don't actually see a lot of it because I see a lot more chronic disease cases. And frankly, most of the patients I see are overfed instead of underfed, which is a different version of malnourishment. But refeeding syndrome is for the starved animals. So let's talk a little bit about how and why that happens and let you have a better understanding of it quickly. So first of all, dogs are scavengers and survivors. Dogs are great at surviving or existing with whatever they have around them. They can get good nutrition from garbage dumps, so they can live in garbage dumps, landfills. They can survive on this crappy dry kibble that you've been taught to feed them. And there's a key word in there. You've been taught by the system to feed dry kibble. There's a big difference between being taught something and learning something for yourself. And I recently did a video about that. That's in this video here about bird flu. So anyway, just like humans, there's different genetic lineages. There's different parts of the world, geographical differences. So some genetic lineages or dog breeds, because that's what breeds are, is just different genetic lineages. Some are better at surviving on low quality garbage than others. Okay. So, and just like humans, again, evolution or nature or genetic instinctual body chemistry knows the value of fat and protein. So there's three macronutrients that everybody talks about all the time. It's on all the food charts: fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Okay, so the body instinctively, human, dog, whatever, knows the value of fats and proteins and doesn't want to use those for daily calories and to stay alive because they're more valuable than that. So fats, for example, they're very efficient sources of energy, and that's what endurance athletes, human endurance athletes, trains their muscles to burn fat. That's where VO2 max, if you've ever heard athletes talking about VO2 max, that's the ability to use oxygen to burn fats efficiently. And it's way more efficient than burning carbs. However, so the dog's body, starvation, or human, you don't want to use your fat. It's too valuable. You want to save that for a rainy day. You want to save that for an emergency. You want to save that for when there is no food or no carbohydrates available. Same thing with protein. Protein's too valuable. We eat protein, and everybody knows you need protein to build muscle. Well, you also need protein for all the enzymes and all the factories and processes in your body that make and do everything. And blood is made of protein. Protein is super duper valuable. You don't want to use that for energy and to stay alive. You want to save that for the important stuff like muscle building. So when you have an option, you humans or dogs, of eating protein and fats and carbs or using them for energy, you're going to use the carbs first, even though they produce less than half of the energy per equal amount than fats and proteins do. Okay. So there's a little bit about that. So to understand refeeding syndrome in animals or human prisoners of war in World War II, you need to realize that these animals, usually they've been tied up on a chain in the backyard, they've been in a hoarding situation, they've been left behind, whatever. They've been starved. They've had no food intake for weeks or months or longer, but they're excellent survivors. Humans are pretty good at surviving too, but dogs are even better. Their bodies will use or metabolize or catabolize every ounce and gram of fat and protein that they have to stay alive. Because what's the point of having good muscles full of protein if you have no blood sugar and energy to keep your brain and heart alive? So when they're in these starvation situations, they'll use up all their fat stores. And when that's gone, they'll start digesting their own muscle proteins and blood and anything else to keep their heart and brain alive. That's why we find these dogs and they literally look like a bag of bones. It's terrible. It's like the Humane Society Sarah McLachlan commercials. It's bad, but they bounce back because they're such good survivors. So as soon as we start getting some real food into them, some fat and protein, they start rebuilding and they do fine. So this is what you have to think about with refeeding syndrome. These animals have been living off of fat and protein, their own body stores, for weeks or months. No carbohydrates. They haven't been eating. In the wild, if they were out surviving on their own and not starving, they'd be eating mice or squirrels or bugs or lizards or whatever they find. Those animals, those living bodies, are mostly fat and protein, almost no carbs at all in there. They weren't designed to eat carbs. Dogs were not designed to eat carbs, just like humans weren't designed to eat carbs. So the problem with refeeding syndrome is not that we refeed them too much, too fast. The dry, processed, artificial, carbohydrate-laden dog food that's made by all the big companies, Purina, Eukanuba, Science Diet, Royal Canin, IAMS, whatever you want to call it, it's all carbs. And when you switch quickly from burning fats and proteins to burning the high sugar carbs, it changes electrolytes and acid base and body chemistry and blood chemistry, and liver gets overwhelmed. And these animals get super sick and deathly ill, and we call it refeeding syndrome. It's not refeeding syndrome. It's carbohydrate feeding syndrome, if you want to be technical about it. So if you have a refeeding syndrome case, or you're worried about having one because you have a malnourished starvation case diet, feed them real food. Feed them proteins and fats. Don't feed them too much too fast. You'll overwhelm the system. But that's not the biggest part of the problem. The biggest part of the problem is feeding them carbs instead, okay? A little bit more information about what dogs are supposed to eat and what I recommend to people is in the nutrition guide that you can find here on my website. Thanks for listening. Bye.